Hello, my name is Janbir Sandhu, and I'm the Internship and Training Manager here at HomeFirst. Welcome to HomeFirst. Welcome to New Hire Training Series, and welcome to the Assessment and Documentation Training. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about what is assessment, what is a form of assessment in your role here at HomeFirst. And this training is to give you an idea of what an assessment can look like and how do we document, what is our agency's standard for documenting in case notes, and how do we do that on a routine basis. So first of all, I'd like to talk to you about observation, using our eyes as a form of assessment. Our observational skills in our daily line of work, in our group settings and individual settings, can really make a big difference in realizing and understanding someone's behavior, a pattern of behavior, to help maintain safety and really assess risk and assess how someone is doing. Take a look at their presentation. Are they different from one day to the next? Is something going on with them to help resolve some of those conflicts, but also to document what is going on in the work that you're doing together. So a few things on safety. In your observational skills, you should always position yourself so that you're sitting closer to the exit. If you're meeting with them in a closed door setting, that's perfectly fine, but make sure to angle your computer, your laptop, your paper, and your chair in a way that your exit is not blocked by the other person in case they do become agitated, upset, that your safety is paramount and is not something that's jeopardized. Also, observing behavior of our guests, making sure that we see what's happening. We talked a little bit earlier about their presentation. How are they presenting today? What are their attitudes like today? How are they pretty close to their baseline behavior? They're pretty close to how they normally act, and being able to communicate that with your team. Being able to, of course, collect that information for documentation, but being able to share it in an email or through a walkie-talkie, or again, just a heads up to a colleague who works with you on how they're doing and how things might be different. And again, documenting that in a formal fashion. If case notes are a responsibility and part of your job, then being able to document that in your case notes. And we'll take a look at what that looks like. Our observational skills, of course, in the interview process is a form of an assessment. When we do a mental health status exam, when we ask a shelter guest to report how they are, and when we follow up on their reports and compare them to the last time they checked in with us, that is a form of their own assessment, and that's a form of us assessing how they're doing, especially if we're comparing to how they were the day before or the day before that or that morning. If someone had a job interview and they were very excited, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed in the morning, and by the afternoon they were a little bit more withdrawn and sullen, you're gonna want to check in with that person and ask them, hey, you had an interview today, how did things go and how are you doing today? And in assessing what's going on with them, you're going to get a read, right? Because again, a lot of what we share is our body language. A lot of what we share is our tone of voice. So you're going to get a read on kind of what's going on with them and be able to help address that situation by meeting with them ahead of time, and then also be able to document that in case notes if that's something that your job requires you to do. And building rapport, right? Building rapport with our program participants or shelter guests helps us develop an understanding of who someone is and how they are, and notice the changes in their behaviors from each day, from each stressor. So we can really develop an understanding of how do they cope. How do they normally cope? What is a usual way for them to react, and what is abnormal and unusual for them? Knowing that, of course, when stressful situations happen, we all act in an abnormal way, right? That's a crisis. A crisis is a abnormal time in which our response is also very abnormal. So taking a look at that, but building a rapport can be a protective factor in understanding how someone is, and can really clue us in how we use our assessment skills and our eyes on a day-to-day basis. Sorry about that. I'm going to talk a little bit about our assessment tools. What are some common assessment tools we use here at HomeFirst? So first, we do our assessments at entry through our VI-SPDAT process, our Vulnerability Index Service Prioritization and Decision Assistance tool, through our HMIS enrollment forms, getting to know someone, right? Spending a moment introducing yourself, introducing your pronouns, asking them for theirs, asking them for what their needs are in a needs assessment form and in mental health assessment forms. These are all forms that we assess how someone is at the very beginning of our work together and building a relationship and building a professional rapport and conducting the work that we're paid to do. Our continual assessments look like our HMIS status updates, our SPDAT, the full SPDAT assessments, our action plans where we really put action and take a look at what are our goals in housing, what are the participants' goals in employment and in enriching themselves in education and other goals that they have in their lives, and their housing plans of what are the plans set in place in order for them to really end their homelessness. These are all continual assessments that we utilize in order to benchmark the work that we're doing and benchmark how someone is doing as well in their health and wellness. So if someone's really falling behind on their assessment plan, they're not showing up, they're not calling the individuals that they need to call, something might be going on with them. That's a great time to check in. That's a great clue for you to check in and begin assessing about what's happening with them and what type of work you need to do. So this is really going to inform the interventions that you're going to use and really respond in a careful, in a well-mannered way, put together to really address their current needs. Maybe their needs are changing and we need to update our case plan or our SPDAT assessment based on what's going on with them. And this allows for us to do that. And so I want you to think about your role. What's your role in developing an assessment with the participants? It could be that you are frontline staff and your role is just to collect the data and make sure it's readily available for someone who, when they do qualify for a program, to access. So your role would be to collect good, accurate data. It would be to not make assumptions. It would be to go slow and make sure that you're reflecting this person's self-report as much as you can. And how can we support an individual in maintaining their goals, right? That's the other part of the role that we have here at HomeFirst, is how do we support someone in maintaining their goals? Having that check-in goes a really long way. Addressing their needs goes a really long way. Finding a way for us to connect with individuals on a day-to-day level that's genuine goes a really long way for us to understand, again, their stressors, understand where they currently are, and their levels of engagement with someone. We could really help predict someone's progress that way. We can also benefit someone's progress. They say that most of the treatment, regardless of the type of intervention you use, most of the progress that happens in treatment happens because is a good indicator of how the rapport is being built. If there's good, strong rapport, there's going to be movement for the positive. There's going to be positive changes. But if you don't have good rapport with someone, it's really hard for us to track and really correlate any successes. So there's a direct correlation between the level of rapport and connectivity you have built with someone and how successful they are going to be in maintaining their goals. So that's something to think about in the assessments that we complete on a day-to-day basis. So here's a view of some of the assessments. I'm going to open some of them up really quickly. This one is a needs assessment. It's going to open up here shortly. Excuse me, that we use here at HomeFirst. So here is an assessment form, the needs assessment form that we are currently using here at HomeFirst. This form is used within some programs to identify someone's wellness, and you can see the areas of wellness are quite extensive. They're mental health, dental health, physical health, substance use, eligibility for specialized services like VA services or affordable clinics if they have a need for medication or nutrition or counseling. Again, immediate needs, again, shelter and safety for domestic violence, for safety, legal issues, crisis, employment with help with resumes, job finding, access to clothes or computers, income related, again, disability, SSI, SSDI, family income, singles income, taking a look at their educational goals. What are their educational needs? Their financial needs. Do they need help with budgeting or have a representative payee or a fiduciary or opening up a bank account? Transportation, taking a look at the car repair or bus repair, or do they need a driver's license assistance or transportation by the form of bus passes or things like that. Daily living, what's important to them and what do they need help with, and getting community classes, fitness classes, volunteering, relationship issues with friends or family, housing related issues, of course, security deposit, rental assistance, fair housing rights, utilities, landlord mediation, and then childcare. What are their immediate needs when it takes if they have a family, what are their family unit needs as well. So all of this information is collected in a needs assessment form, and you can see there's boxes for the individual to check off so they can identify their needs. There's space for the case manager to really identify and define what that need is really quickly, and for the individual to write in here what that need is specifically. And this is a place for the case manager or the working resident advocate or anyone to write the progress. What's going on? What's happening? Where were they referred? What was the next steps? So that we can really take a look at this assessment form as a living and breathing document. And it really is helpful in understanding their current needs and assessing their current needs and moving forward. So that's one form. That was our needs assessment form. Next, I'm going to open up our monthly action plan. And it looks like this. Our monthly action plan is a plan. I'm sorry, there we are. That is an individual case plan that allows for us to focus on building objectives around the goals of obtaining permanent housing, increasing someone's income or education or skills, and developing a personal care plan goal that really assists them in stabilization, finding stability, and ending their homelessness. And each goal, we ask for the person to really define, what does obtain permanent housing mean for you? So we don't just leave this there and say that this is filled out. We ask for them to put this into quotes. What does finding permanent housing mean to you? And having their definition of what permanent housing is, we get to write their quote down here right next to it in order for us to highlight that this is their goal. For someone, it might be a studio apartment in Gilroy where they can have peace and quiet. For someone else, it might be the ability for them to share a 2-bedroom so that they can have a much more communal space with someone as well. So it could be very different. So finding out what that goal is for them, and then finding out individual objectives. What are absolute things that an individual can do to help make this goal happen? We break this goal down into smaller pieces that are going to help us complete this goal, and we assign responsibility. It might be you as a case manager, resident advocate, and it might be the other person as a clinician, it might be the participant themselves, or it might be both. So you're responsible for doing that. You'd put that here, you write the target date, and when it was actually completed, right? This gives the person a sense of accomplishment if it was completed before. Even if it was completed after the target date, the fact that it was completed makes a really big difference. And here you would write services needed to achieve this goal. You would write maybe they need a computer lab, maybe they need rides in order to have interviews, or they need assistance with finding application fee funding so that they can really increase the chances of putting more applications out there and receiving more housing of availabilities. And that goes same for the education, employment, increasing income goals, and also same for their self-develop goal. And we, of course, make a commitment and we have the person sign this goal in order for them to work together, in order for us to strengthen the work and really meet the individual's stability needs. So this is a monthly action plan. This can also be seen as a form of an assessment and really help us define the intervention that we use with someone to meet their current goals. Next, we're going to take a look at our HMIS enrollment forms, and there are various. So here are some program-specific forms. You can go to scc.hmis.clientforms and take a look at program request forms, which we don't need. We would mostly take a look at HMIS standards or general forms like the partner agency list that's needed for our consent via SPDATS, and then of course our program-specific intake forms, status update forms, and exit forms. So if you're a VA provider, you would use a form that's here. If you are a program funded by HUD, the Continuum of Care, you would use a program here. So I'm going to open up let's say a PDF of the intake form. So we're going to take a look at this together. This is an 8-page HMIS project intake form in Clarity for us to input. And as you can see, it asks for someone to have this information presented to them. It's in block letters, and we have to use a separate form for each person. But this is a form for us to collect assessment information about who they are, about how they identify themselves, their current needs. As you can see, lots of questions about veterans as well, and document their current level of homelessness and take a look at the night before and their stabling conditions, all towards finding out what programs they can qualify for in Santa Clara County, their income and from which sources, non-cash benefits, health insurance. And then at the end, they sign. So you get the ability to capture all this information on one form. And then we can't leave it there. We've got to enter into HMIS. Another form of entering this into HMIS is to open the form up directly in HMIS upon enrollment and filling the documentation out there, printing out a copy and having them sign it at the very end. But this is an intake form that's also used in assessment of an individual's needs currently and in the moment. And that talks about documentation, right? It really talks to us not just taking a look at assessing someone's needs, but then how do we report that, right? Documentation is a communication tool in which we record our work, and it is a means by which cases are managed and a manner in which services are evaluated, assessed, and of course reimbursed. It's required for professional case management function, and it's a permanent record of someone's services. So the permanent record of what someone does in a program, the services that they receive in a program. So everything that you do is made public record. So that's something for you to think about. I mean, public record, of course, protected by HIPAA and only accessed by individuals who are qualified to do so, but it's still against part of their permanent record. So what should be in a note? So we're going to take a look at the document worksheet of what should be in a note and where should we document this information. The platforms for us to record the information, there's two. There's HMIS, our Help Management Information System or Homeless Management Information System, and Unicare. Unicare is for our mental health support notes that we use in Medi-Cal billing. And our mental health notes are done on an SRD template on Excel, but for the most part, all of our notes are done on HMIS in the program specific area. And if you've sat through training on HMIS general care, clarity and privacy training with our database manager here at HomeFirst, she'll have a detailed view of where you would enter in notes and what that would look like. And something about timelines as well. I want to mention that if your program requires for you to complete notes, the timelines for completing and recording documentation at HomeFirst is 72 hours. And I think that's true for Medi-Cal notes as well. You have 3 days to turn around, finish your notes, and get them turned into your program manager for approval or upload them onto HMIS so that we can continue to support and show. And that's just because if you become ill one day, don't come to work, or are on vacation, someone can follow up with your program participants on your behalf and will have the up-to-date information on what you've been working on. And we can continue to build that partnership from there on. So we talked about what goes in a note, right? And we follow at HomeFirst the PERP format. Here's a sample of what a general note would look like. Of course, depending on the funding source, you might be asked to add more content. If you're from the VA, you might be asked to add more content. Of course, if you're part of the Medi-Cal program, you might be asked to not just add more content, but really describe more under each PERP. We still follow the PERP format, but you would give more description to each. So the first P stands for problem or presentation. The second P the I stands for intervention. What you did as staff, how did you intervene? What services did you provide? Oh, and the third one is the response. How did the participant respond? Did they agree? Did the intervention work? Were they happy? Were they not happy? Did they walk away? Right? What was the response? And lastly, of course, the plan. What are you going to do moving forward? It might be you, or what is a participant going to do moving forward, or what's going to happen? What are the next steps moving forward? So we're going to take a look at case notes and writing case notes and take a look at what that looks like in writing for all of us. So here is a simple example for you to take a look at when writing a case note. At the top, you're going to write the length of time in minutes. You're going to take a look at how long was your intervention. Was it 15 minutes? Was it a 45-minute intervention? Was it half an hour? And where you met. Was it at BRC? Was it in your staff office? I would just write, at agency or in the field or at client's home, depending on where you met. And you would write out the PERP format complete like this. You would have the P typed out for problem or presentation. You'd have the I typed out and the R and the P as well. So here's an example. This writer met with a client in the community to go over employment options and application deadlines. So now this shows us why someone was meeting, right? The problem. Or the reason for them to meet, if you think about, right? If we always think about it as a problem, but there's a reason for them to meet. They're going over employment options and application deadlines. The intervention, what did the staff do? This writer. We always refer to ourselves in that this writer once removed way, because if we start to use I, that's really hard for the reader, the person who's auditing, to read your notes. You're going to have a different audience. So you always want to refer to yourself in the third person and stick with this writer. This writer checked in with the client and on how he's been doing during the week. The writer gave client resources on job fairs in order to assist the client in increasing his income. The writer explored with the client different reasons he hasn't been looking for a job. Okay, so that's great. This person checked in with them, they gave them resources, and they talked about why is it that they're currently not looking for a job. Right? That's all important interventions. Response. The client stated he's been sick, not wanting to look for a job. The client stated even though he's feeling better now, he's still unmotivated to look for a job. They agreed to look for a job, but asked if the writer could join them for support. So now that's a great response, right? Like you get a little bit of rationale for why they haven't been looking for a job, but also now that they're feeling better, that's still going to kind of continue. So that exploration of why they haven't been looking for a job was very successful. Right? This person agreed that they would go to the job fair, the resource that this person had, but they would like for that case manager to go with them. So then the plan becomes this writer will accompany the client to the next job fair in order to encourage him to start looking for jobs again. So that's great. Now they have a plan together. So what would really tie this up is to write when that next job fair is, maybe where it is, maybe what time it is, and where they're going to meet, so that we have a solid plan for this person to move forward and really address their needs. So this is a great way that we can document the intervention that we did, the response of someone, and how we move forward in conducting our work together. And here's some things you should always keep in mind. These are also part of your handouts as well, but I wanted to put them up here for us to review together, is to always check your spelling and grammar when writing your case notes. Demonstrate consistent line and treatment. So if with a plan you wrote that you're going to have a scheduled appointment with them next, then that next note should pick up that thread. It should be dated the day of that you wrote in your last note when that appointment was. So someone else who's reading it should be able to find out what happened and how it happened and why. Notes should always contain the next step, that follow-up information. And if we're referring to an agency or a contact, you should list the entire name of the agency and the worker's full name in parentheses in your notes so that we can find out who is it that you're working with, rather than I talked to the intake specialist at abode. So you want to write abode services and intake specialist dash so and so. Jonna Smith. I don't know. You would write their full name down. I would go as far as even writing their contact information down. So if this person needs to get a hold of them, they can. But that's just me. Case notes should reflect housing and self-sufficiency goals and progress. Our work should be about self-sufficiency goals and housing, and how is it that we're working with someone to build stability. And so that should be reflected in our case notes. Also, something to think about, there is no I in case notes, right? We talked about this, that we should always use this writer. Include the time in minutes always on the top of your note, and also document the location of your service so we can get a context of what was happening around you and when and how the service was provided. And if you're using standard abbreviations like some of these symptoms, history, treatment, without, etc., you first have to write out that full word in each note, and the next time you write it, you could then abbreviate it and we will know what you're talking about. But you should never use an abbreviation without first spelling out the full word. So these are some do's and don'ts in writing a case note. So here we're going to get an opportunity to put those things together and have an example case note for you guys to look at. So I'm going to bring that up here, and this should be part of your packets as well. So I would like for the facilitator, if you can please, put me on pause, and I would love for each one of you to split off into teams, groups of 2 to 4s, and take a look and be assigned one of these. I think there's 4 here, case notes, and take a look at, answer these 2 questions. Does this note follow PERP format? At what information is needed to correct this note? If you were writing this note, if you were auditing this note, what information is missing? Right? What information is needed to make sure that this note would follow PERP format and would be a good auditable note, right? Or would you make the person go back and do it again? Right? So facilitator, please put me on pause, divide everyone in groups so that they can continue to work and edit these notes in with the PERP format. All right. So I hope that you were able to have good success in correcting the note, and I hope everyone was able to make a presentation about it. I didn't mention that in my instructions earlier. I'm sorry about that, facilitator. But if you have the ability to correct the note, I would love for the group to present to everyone else. Maybe have the facilitator read out the example and have the group talk about what they would correct and how they would correct it. I'm going to take a brief pause for you guys to do so if you haven't done so already. All right, so hopefully you used the pausing tool to put me on pause and to have that discussion. Next, I want to put the formal note writing structure. This is a very handy tool that you can use. It should also be a part of your handout package today. This is a case an example of what your case notes structure should look like. So this should again be part of your packet. This information you've already seen. Here's the example that we did together on the PowerPoint, the entire form. And then I have a group example here for you as well. Same thing, length of time in minutes and the location of the meeting. The purpose would be the purpose of the group, right? How many people are attending, who ran the group. There's an example that this writer provided a psychosocial group. The group is meant to decrease isolation and increase the client's pro-social awareness. Then you would list the intervention right, that you use in the groups. And this section should be and can be the same for each person, because again, you use the intervention for the entire group. So this writer engaged the client in thought reframing. This writer asked the client open-ended questions about past social behaviors. This writer facilitated a discussion on triggers to anxiety and brainstormed ways for client to cope with those triggers. So that's great. This is a very supportive group in really understanding pro-social behavior and engaging in your communities. The response would be different, right? So the response here, how the client responded, each person would respond differently. So you may have to take notes to really figure out how someone would respond. So a client that was initially distracted during the group had low participation. They responded midway through the group by stating their triggers and their anxiety, and they were able to brainstorm with others on how to cope. Right? So everyone's response could be slightly different. And then the plan would be what's going to happen next time. The section will be and can be the same for everyone. The group will meet every 2 weeks and will have their homework ready to share with the group if there is no homework. And if someone doesn't show for the group, you would just write that they didn't attend and something like the writer will follow up with client. And that way you can't really follow the PERP format if someone wasn't there, but we've got to write something instead. And so you would use that did not attend, client writer will follow up as needed. So this is the handy dandy case note example worksheet for you to have put in your training binder for you to use when you're documenting your case notes. Also something for you to have are the case management activities, and I'm going to bring those out here now for you to take a look at, and these should also be in your handy dandy guide. But these it's not a comprehensive list, but some interventions, right? Some activities. How is it that you intervened? Maybe you advocated for someone, you provided reflective listening, you engaged with someone, you worked with them in developing a case plan, you coordinated their work with someone, you corresponded or communicated with someone over the phone to assist them in developing resources. You explored, you facilitated, you participated, you reinforced a skills building technique, you scheduled an event for someone, you linked them to services, you worked on skills development, right? So these, not an exhaustive list, but a small list of some interventions that you may be able to use in your line of work with an individual. And the last one, the action words, sorry about that, for progress notes. These are some things that you can really use to describe your interventions, to describe the intervention that you used, and to describe the effectiveness, that this is the response section. Or it could be for you that you focus them on something that you adopted a different level of a different voice to engage with them. You help them resolve a conflict. Or it could be their response, that they refused, or they ignored, or they accepted, or they chose, right, to work with you and really take a look at what's going on. But this is some words for you to really take a look at how you can describe your interventions in progress notes. Again, a guide for you to use, not an exhaustive list, but a list for you to go through and really work on. So I hope that experience of going through the 4 different case notes was helpful. The do's and don'ts were helpful for you to understand that if you don't document it, it didn't happen. That is how funding works. And remember, our HMIS data links directly to the funding that we receive, links directly to the work that we do, links directly to the positions that are made available here at HomeFirst. So if your job is to document an assessment, that we do so to the best of our ability without assuming what the person's needs are, without assuming anything about them, but really asking to address really asking the questions outright and having them answer. If your role is then as a case manager to report, not just to collect the assessment information, but then to document day-to-day work in case notes, that we document that well, right? And you follow that up with a service transaction, and you can talk to Teresa, our our database manager, who can talk to you about what service transactions are. And every time you have a note entered, you should have some type of a service transaction that is a quantifiable way for us to show that a service occurred. So at the end of the year, we can round up how many case management services were provided, right? And so that number will ding up. But the qualitative result of what really took place in case planning and to meet someone's unique needs will be recorded in a case note. So again, I want to remind you, if it didn't happen, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen, right? That's something to think about. So if you have any questions, please ask those questions to your facilitator at this time. I want to thank you for participating in the New Hire Training Week, and I want to thank you for participating in the assessment and documentation training.